Despite his defection to America, Australians still feel some ownership of Rupert Murdoch. But it's the scandal in Britain that has thrown him personally into the media spotlight. After months of investigations, News International has finally admitted liability for widespread and systematic phone hacking on its News of the World paper, where journalists listened in to private calls of celebrities and politicians. And all just as the Culture Secretary is about to rule on whether News Corp can take over the revenue jewel in British broadcasting, B Sky B. I'm joined now from our London studio by Chris Goodhall from Enders Analysis. Chris Goodhall, welcome to the programme.
Thank you. Good evening.
Well, I think the word is truth. Rupert Murdoch in person has apologised and reportedly put aside millions for compensation monies. How significant is this?
It's going to get a lot more significant. He's put aside a relatively small pot of money, £20 million, but most of the comment here in London at the moment is that will be nowhere near sufficient to deal with the probably over 100 individual legal actions against the News of the World for phone hacking.
This actually could get a lot more public, couldn't it, if the celebrities and others refuse? I mean, the News Corp could end up in court.
Yeah, I think it's almost inevitable that some of the celebrities, some of the politicians who were affected by this, allegedly, nothing's been proved yet, allegedly affected by this, are not going to accept compensation before a court action. We're going to see this issue dragged through the courts over the next 1, 2, 3 years.
Do you think that this will impact on the News Corporation bid for the whole of B Sky B?
No, I don't think it will. I think it's quite clear the Secretary of State for Culture, Jeremy Hunt, in this country, is looking entirely at whether there's a sufficient plurality, a sufficient number of people providing news and comment to the UK audience. This issue, however relevant it may look, actually will not be any part of his discussions or decision. There
are a lot of voices, very strong ones from The Guardian, I know, suggesting that that's a very narrow definition of plurality.
Well, absolutely. Has News International shown itself to be committed to the kind of standards that we expect in British broadcasting, you'd expect in Australian broadcasting? The answer on the evidence today is that it is not. However, that is not what Mr Hunt is making a judgment about.
If Mr Hunt does approve the B Sky B deal, just how powerful will that make News Corp in Britain?
Well, in my view, and this is a personal view, overwhelmingly powerful. He will have almost a half of the total revenues going into British television. He will have just under 40% of the circulation of national newspapers. He'll be providing all the radio news to commercial radio stations in the UK. The list goes on. This is by far the single most important corporation in British media, both now and at any time in the past.
One of the ways he's been able to appease the British government is by hiving off Sky News. Now, is that a good way to proceed? I mean, from what you're saying, it's perhaps not, or has the point about the culture or the alleged culture of News Corporation, a sort of whatever it takes culture of its journalists, been missed?
Well, let me make one thing clear, if I may. Sky News, the satellite TV news channel of B Sky B in the UK, is an absolutely superb news channel. Nobody, as far as I know, has ever criticised it for partiality. Now, what has been proposed, however, is a sort of semi-separation of Sky News that leaves Sky News in the same building as B Sky B, leaves the people who work there eating in the same canteen as the people who work for B Sky B. It's not a true separation. What we've been arguing for is a complete separation funded by a trust that gives effective independence to Sky News, and we're still concerned that really Sky News could be put under excessive influence by News Corporation in New York.
You mentioned how powerful this will make News Corporation in the UK. How has this deal been allowed to get through, presumably, a lot of European regulations when it comes to competition?
Well, what the European Commission looked at was whether there was any reduction in competition. And the Commission decided that since B-Sky B was almost entirely in news provision, in television provision, and News International is entirely a newspaper business, there was no loss of competition because they didn't compete with each other at all. They competed in entirely separate markets. Now, I think to many of that looks a very old-fashioned view, as different media converge and become almost indistinguishable from one another. However, that's what the European Commission decided 3 or 4 months ago, and there's nothing that the UK itself, as a member of the European Union, can do about that.
The FT's Lex column says over the last 15 years, News Corp has lagged behind the S&P 500 index by a third. On balance, employees at underperforming parts of the empire probably have the most to fear from eventual regime change. Will this B-Sky B deal do a lot to change that?
No, I don't think so. This corporation is run for the very long term by a very powerful family who intend to stay in the saddle. I don't think the takeover of B-Sky B, which is a phenomenal cash-generating machine, will do anything much in the UK. What it will do is allow News Corporation to get into pay television more effectively around the rest of the world. And that's what this is really all about, is it's making sure that News Corporation becomes the single most important provider of pay television to people around the world.
Well, I'm enjoying the cartoons in the UK at the moment. Chris Goodhall, great to get your perspective. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you.